I am joined by Rob Dalto. Rob Dalto is of the Bronx Burners Run Club. Rob is joining us to help answer the question that we get probably asked the most is how do we get into races? And it was something that came through our social channels a lot. So we thought, let's speak to Rob, the man who knows everything. 26 majors under his belt, on his way towards his fourth Abbott World Marathon Majors, 6-star medal. The man who knows how to get into every race and is here to give us some insight into how he just does that. Rob, welcome to Marathon Talk.
Let's get into some races, Dave.
Great stuff. Well, I think it makes impeccable logic for us to start at the start of the calendar year and the race that just took place a couple of weeks ago, the Tokyo Marathon. So obviously the Tokyo Marathon happens the first weekend of March every year, and 38,000 runners around that take the start line in outside the government building in Shinjuku. Now, Rob, you've done that 4 times, I'm correct? And you have correct. Experience of getting the through the ballot. So yeah, tell us more about getting a place in the Tokyo Marathon.
Yeah, getting a place in the Tokyo Marathon is certainly one of the most difficult of all the Abbott World Marathon Majors. But fortunately, there are very viable routes to get in. First, and the traditional route to go is they've got a ballot. So applying for that and crossing your fingers. Several times, twice, I've gone through the charity program, which is actually among, if not the most accessible of all of the races, though it follows a different process that is a bit unique. When it comes to Tokyo, the process that the charities follow is that you actually pledge your amount up front. And typically the selection is based on the amount that you pledge. And also uniquely, they have you commit that pledge up front and then do your fundraising later. So the process is a bit unique, whereas most of the other ones, you set a goal and you raise as you get closer to the race. This one, you actually kind of do it in reverse. So I think that brings a little bit of discomfort and unfamiliarity to folks, but what it results in is actually some accessible minimums. So I've seen some things published that in 2024, 2025, between $1,000 or $1,500 US is around the kind of the entry point, which is much lower than some other races. So the charity option is a great route for Tokyo.
Wonderful. And of course, next year we will be hosting the Abbott World Marathon Majors Marathon Tours and Travel Age Group World Championships. So for faster runners who are aged over 40, the opportunity to run Tokyo has never been greater. That championships happens every year, and we have ranking events, over 370 events happening around the world for you to qualify. So if people are of a speedier nature and aged over 40 and want to run Tokyo next year, looking into that would be probably a good idea. Rob, in your experience, is there any other more unfamiliar routes that people might not know about that you have learned in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple, actually. One, through the One Tokyo program. And so that's, one of the membership programs that Tokyo has, and they run a number of challenges, both for Japanese nationals and for international runners that reserve spots. I've known a number of folks who've gotten in through that method. And also some of the race sponsors put on challenges. So Runkeeper, for example, and ASICS being one of the headline sponsors of that race, have reserved 100 spots for runners who've gone through challenges through the app. And so there's a lot of ways to engage with the event that yield pretty significant numbers of spots available for runners.
Amazing. That's the info. That's the info we came for. That's how we get it. Thank you. So moving on to the next one, and this is a big one. This is people are going to be interested in this one. The Boston Marathon. Boston Marathon happens Patriots Day every year, the third Monday of April. A smaller field than our other races, about 33,000 runners. This isn't a ballot. This is a time qualifying event. So. And I think it's usually the second week of September when invitations sort of go out. So, Rob, can you give us some detail on maybe explaining the time qualification element? I know every year it's set differently, and then also your experience in other ways of getting a place in this famous race.
Absolutely. Yeah, so for the Boston Marathon, the most unique aspect is that time qualification aspect. It for many of the age group runners is sort of the holy grail of the sport. And the way that works for those who aren't familiar is that there's a time qualifying threshold. You must run faster than that threshold to be able to apply for selection, and then those spots are given out on a fastest first basis until they run out of spots. And so there have been years where everyone who qualifies is accepted, and there are years where there's a several minute buffer. So there's always a bit of anxiety induced in that waiting period where you find out if you were able to be selected, if that was your route of entry. But there are other options as well, Dave. So charity running is, an incredible route in the Boston Marathon. As you called out, Boston and its 130-year legacy has always been one of the smaller races. So spots are quite limited and quite coveted. And so, charity placings are of high value. And so oftentimes you see folks raising, minimums of $7,000, $10,000 for spots, which is really high and also incredibly impactful for the communities. And so I always love cheering on the charity runners, knowing the impact that they've had on the community. But that's not all. There are other ways to get into the Boston Marathon. I think that's what you're asking about, isn't it?
A bit of insight, and that would be most welcome, I think.
Well, I'll mention a few that I've seen. I mean, you talked about Marathon Tours and Travel as the sponsor of the Age Group World Championships. Tour operators are an option for the Boston Marathon. But you got to get there early because spots are limited. And then I've seen options open up also, through the majors. So, and maybe you can speak a little bit more about this, but as I was approaching my 6-star and looking for ways to get into the races, the Road to the Majors program, which holds reserve spots for runners who have completed a certain number of stars already, to create, those opportunities to get into places like Boston, and also the Abbott World Marathon Majors Gold Club, which hosts smaller sub-lotteries for its members.
Yeah, to give some meat on the bones on Road to the Majors. Road to the Majors is a virtual challenge that we run through our Global Run Club app, which is 6 times a year. We offer people a chance to run a half marathon to get a place in our draws. And obviously we open the draws to everyone. So the Road to Majors are extra places in the draws. If you have, in Boston's case, I think if you have 4 or more stars, you're eligible. Once you're in our database with 4 or more stars, you're eligible for a place in our Boston ballot if you haven't already done Boston. We only have 150 places for Boston, so they are quite rare and quite sought after, but I can tell you they always get snapped up, and there's very rarely any extra kind of left over. They always get used. But as I said, then the Road to the Majors increases your chance in that ballot. So if you ran 6 half marathons over the course of the year, you could potentially have 7 lucky tickets in our ballot for Boston. And it's been, since we introduced this program maybe 2 years ago, to see the feedback we get from our audience to talk about how these ballots have made such a difference to people has been really warming, because as you say, it's because it's a time qualification race. Many people just won't be able to get that fast. So to find out, offer other ways of getting around is vital, I think, for allowing more people to complete their 6-star journey in Boston. And this year we have, as we prepare for it, we're only a few weeks out from Boston. We have a record. 1,600 people will be getting their 6-star medal in Boston, which is double last year, and that was double the year before. So we're seeing more. There's more and more ways to get in, and more ways to complete Boston. Moving on from Boston, we come to my hometown, to London, to the TCS London Marathon. It takes place the Sunday after Boston, so it's a busy week for us. We go from Boston straight to the expo in London, pretty much, and the London field is 60,000, give or take. And of that, the general population ballot opens the day after the race. And last year there was 1.1 million applications for about 17,000 places. So demand for London is high. But Rob, if you don't get lucky in the public ballot, tell us the ways you can get in via the non-public ballot.
Yeah, the numbers in London are just staggering. The letters that go out from all the majors, if you were to apply for the ballot and not get accepted, I don't think are kind of pale in comparison to the demand that you see in London. Charity program, excellent option. Tour operators, excellent option. And then for British nationals, there is a good for age program as well for some of the faster athletes. But charity, tour operators, that's going to be your best bet if you don't get into the ballot.
I think as well we'll have many American listeners who would be maybe looking at London as perhaps maybe their first international marathon. So by taking a tour operator route, it's beneficial. But what little insight as well, by doing one tour operator offering, it sort of puts you a little bit higher up the waiting list for other races if you are, say, looking for Tokyo or something like that. So something to consider, and you'll obviously be treated incredibly well and get to experience the city, not just the race, but everything else that the greatest city in the world has to offer.
Yeah, and on the tour operator side, I kind of had a myth dispelled for me over time. I used to have this kind of bias. I was like, oh, a tour operator must be like super expensive to do that. And looking at a tour operator, at first I had sticker shock. And then by the time I went through a race and realized, hey, these are big cities and the hotels actually turned out to be expensive. When I compared my trip with some of my friends who went with the tour operator route, it actually ended up being exactly the same, and that they got a lot more out of the experience. So I actually celebrate the tour operator route. They do a really, really nice job. I've seen them now as I've kind of gone through the major circuit. And if you haven't explored it and you want to get into the races, they're a fantastic route. And some of them have quite significant numbers of bibs for the races, and put on a really, really good experience with great communities. So huge thumbs up to them.
Yes, they're great. So moving on, so we're past the sort of halfway mark of the season. We're moving into August. The latest addition to the Abbott World Marathon Majors family is Sydney, the TCS Sydney Marathon presented by AWMM. Last year was the first edition. I know you were there as to visit down under, and as it's sort of growing, we're expecting, I think last year the field for Sydney was 33,000. And I think this year's field is going to be around 36,000. So they're growing the field incrementally as they develop they learn year on year how much they can hold and what they can do. So, tell us about your experience of Sydney last year, and also, what your understanding is in terms of getting places down there.
Yeah, what a great experience they put on in Sydney. I had the opportunity to run it as its last year in candidacy, and then its first year as an official major. For anyone who did run it during its candidacy period, you actually had guaranteed reserved entry for any of the subsequent 3 years, which is really cool. So if anybody had happened to take place in that, they would know that they've got that opportunity to secure their guaranteed entry. Other than that, the traditional methods that we spoke about for some of the other races all hold. You've got a ballot. It remains a bit more accessible because it's a newer race. So the volume of applicants is not quite as high. So your odds are a little bit better. You've got your charity route. You've got tour operators. So you've got a number of great options to get in there. I ran the race last year with Team Abbott, and so that's a great option. So US-based runners. Team Abbott is a community of runners with a connection to health and their running communities, and any US runners available to apply to that for guaranteed entry to any of the Abbott World Marathon Majors. But that's a route I took to get into Sydney last year.
Yeah, Team Abbott have a presence at every race, and we love to kind of spotlight their stories on our social channels as well. And what the interesting point you actually made as well about Sydney being such a kind of destination. I met so many people at expos in the last couple of since Sydney who've said that they kind of spent 2 weeks in Australia kind of getting used to it, and then doing the race, and then spend another week in going to New Zealand or just experiencing more of the city. It happens at a nice time of the year, especially from a UK point of view, because the kids are out of school, so you can make a family trip out of it. But yes, it's wonderful. Just a note on Sydney as well, the ballot for Sydney usually opens mid-October. And I think, from memory, last year it was just after Christmas when they announced places. So you get the good thing about all the races announcing their ballots plenty of time in advance is you get a chance to book those flights, and you can get to take advantage of a reasonably priced airfare before things start getting crazy the closer you get to the dates. We've done Sydney, and we're moving on to my last major, which was I ran Berlin in 2023. You've had some great times in Berlin. We did a great little video with Rob Romano in Berlin, if you remember that time. I think that was the first time you appeared on one of our channels. So tell us about Berlin and the great city that it is.
Yeah, good times, and kudos to you for working the whole weekend and then getting out and running. It's incredible effort, Dave. But yeah, you should. Look, you've got your lottery. Berlin actually offers this really interesting lottery option where you can apply as a team. So if you've got one or two other friends, you can actually all apply together and all get in or all not get in. And that's a really unique option because when you plan for these events, oftentimes you want to travel with others. So just a really cool approach that they've taken. Also, a lesser known route in the Berlin Marathon, the day before the Berlin Marathon, they do a roller marathon on the same course. And if you complete the roller marathon, you actually get a guaranteed entry into the marathon for the subsequent year. So a little known fact for anyone who wants to pick up rollerblading.
That is a fantastic nugget. If only I could rollerblade.
If only you can rollerblade. But for those who have run the Berlin Marathon, they will have seen at the expo, it's almost about as much about rollerblading as it is about running. Well, I'm being a bit facetious, but there's a ton of stuff there because they do that awesome event the day before the marathon. Aside from that, all the other traditional methods, whole tour operators, charity partners are all amazing ways to get in. And Dave, I don't know if you mentioned this already, but the Gold Club that the Abbott World Marathon Majors puts on, I've heard of multiple people getting into multiple majors through the Gold Club lotteries that you have put on.
Yeah, Gold Club is, I think it's 2,000 people. It's an enclosed group, but we grow it every year. There's a waiting list. If you just search Abbott World Marathon Majors Gold Club, it'll pop up in your search engine of choice. And there's a waiting list, but you can join. And it offers a chance for, there's community elements to it. There's you get a big gift bag when you join, but importantly, there's guaranteed places at races, and we do also events then within races. We had a wonderful event in Tokyo that was attended by, I think we had 150 people there, and similarly in New York, and it fosters a great sense of community. And you will see if you go to any of the expos, when we have our lists on the wall of 6-star finishers, 6-star hopefuls, we mark out the Gold Club members in yellow, so they get a little bit of a spotlight placed upon them. So yeah, the Gold Club is, if you're 2-3 starer and looking to get that next step, and it's a really useful way of getting access. So if the opportunity arises and you get that email inviting you to join, I suggest you take it. One little point I wanted to say about Berlin that goes under the radar a little bit is, of all the races, the ratio of public ballot acceptance is, compared to the greater field, is higher. I think that makes sense. So around 35,000 people get a place in the public ballot out of 55,000 athletes, which is huge. You know, when you compare it to London, which, you know, as I said, 17,000 out of 60,000, and I think New York is less than that, maybe 5,000 out of 60,000. So if you're looking to maybe get your first star, Berlin is always a good little place to start off. Moving across the ponds, second weekend of October, we head to the Windy City, to Chicago. Rob, how does one get into the Chicago Marathon?
Couple options for Chicago. All the options we've already done, traditional ballot, charity, tour operators, are all great options there. A couple other options for American runners as well. They've got a good for age qualification similar to that of Boston. Actually, if you hit the Boston time threshold, you automatically get accepted for Chicago. Again, that's for US runners. And for our steadfast runners, they actually have a legacy program with a much shorter time commitment. So if you've run 5 or more Chicago marathons in the last 10 years, I'm kind of laughing as I say that, realizing that is quite a tall task. But then you get guaranteed entry going forward as well. So great, incredible race, bright and early start in the Windy City, as you said, typically on what is the Columbus Day weekend in the States.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I know obviously this, and we'll come to this in New York, but in Chicago, is there a similar program where if you run, say, the Shamrock Shuffle and the half, there's places available, or am I confusing that with New York?
Yeah, that's right, Dave. So for Chicago, if you compete in their distance series, so that's the Shamrock Shuffle, the 13.1, and the prior year's marathon, you will get guaranteed entry into the following year's Chicago Marathon. Great option for our Chicago residents.
And finally, we go to the last race of the year. It's always my favorite race of the year when we get to go, because we celebrate the season. We get closure of this, the championships. It's, it's such a great city to visit. It's your hometown. You always take us out for a nice meal in a restaurant that is far, far above my pay grade. Tell me about the TCS New York City Marathon.
It's the granddaddy of them all, the best marathon on the planet. I always like to say on a nice weather day, it might be the greatest endurance event to have ever happened, because it really is of that amazing scale. As a New York City resident, I try not to be biased, but I do appreciate that the energy that the city brings is really second to none. And while often, and I think multiple times, broken the record for largest marathon in history, also offers a number of ways in that we should dive into.
Yeah, we're recording, I think, last week, the public ballot was announced and everyone got a place. Those people who did get a place got their places. And as I said, it's about 3,000. So the public ballot is a small percentage. I think last year they had 250,000 applications for 5,000 places, 3,000 places, something like that. So to give you some context of what your chances of getting a public ballot are. But as you're about to tell us, there are other ways.
There are other ways. I hope the total spots available was a little bit higher than that. And for those who are New York Roadrunners members, they do offer a second chance ballot for some of the spots that don't get swooped up. So there's a bit of a second go there, where I've heard folks get in on that before. Tour operators, charity partners, massive charity partnership program for the New York City Marathon. An incredible amount of money is raised for the amazing charity partners of the TCS New York City Marathon and New York Roadrunners as a whole, including their Team for Kids, which just does absolutely amazing work. For locals also, there is a 9+1 program where if you participate in 9 of the New York Roadrunners qualifying races throughout the year and volunteer at one, you secure a guaranteed spot into the following year's marathon. That has been my route of entry every single year that I've run the New York City Marathon, shy of the times I've raised money for some of the charity partners, and a huge kind of cultural phenomenon within the New York City community.
And tell me about the volunteering element of that. What did you have to do to volunteer? Is it...
Yeah, throughout the year, they just offer many different races, like basically any of the races that are available on the calendar offer opportunities to race. I've served in many capacities, whether it's volunteering at the New York City Marathon Expo. I volunteered at the Mini 10K. I personally like volunteering when there's fun activations at races. So for example, there is a gridiron 4-miler, which they host on Super Bowl Sunday typically. And that morning they host a football toss, and every runner has an opportunity to see how far they can toss a football, winner getting a prize. And I like to volunteer at that event. It's a fun one.
That's amazing. That's what we love.
It's so good.
Wonderful. Right. Well, I think that's all 7 races ticked off. We'll have to have you back next year when we want to talk about Cape Town or talk about Shanghai, hopefully. Rob, I really appreciate your time in this, and we've obviously talked about the road to the majors. We talked about the Gold Club. I think that's pretty much ticked off. Was there anything that we might have missed that you might have wanted to add that you think might be relevant for people to be interested in learning?
No, I think you hit most of it, Dave. I think we covered a lot of it. What I do see pop up sometimes is race event sponsors sometimes are offering available spots to community members, and it's really open to everyone. So I was just seeing recently ahead of Boston, Poland Spring, Samuel Adams, Band-Aid, all offering spots. In Tokyo, I learned about Coral Coffee. It had 100 spots available, 50 for nationals, 50 for internationals. And so I keep seeing a lot of these sponsors offering bibs out to the community, which anybody is available to apply for. So if you are trying to get into an Abbott World Marathon Major and you think you missed your shot, just like always keep your eyes peeled for opportunities that may pop up that are really available to anybody, regardless of background and story. And you would be surprised. You know, I always like to say every person, every runner has a story, and it's a story worth being told. Don't be afraid to share your story. You never know if you might get picked up and find yourself in the race for your dreams.
That's amazing. Rob, we'll see you in Boston in a few weeks, I think. You're doing you're doing the 5K, or are you doing a shakeout run?
We'll be hosting a massive shakeout run at the Boston Marathon with some huge surprises. So can't wait to share more about that. And yeah, can't wait to finish the race on Boylston on Patriots Day.
We have a fourth 6-star medal waiting for you in London. If people want to follow you on Instagram, it's Pursuit of Performance, or just check the show notes. I'll have a link there. And once again, Rob, thanks for your time.